Welcome, dear listener. You have found your way to the Sleepy Historian, where we take our time wandering through the forgotten corridors of the past. This channel is, in its own way, a little corner of quiet history, crafted not to thrill or excite, but to soothe, to ease you into rest. Here, we tell boring history for sleep. Gentle stories from the lives of those who came before us. Soft-spoken recollections of human habits, tools, and traditions. If you're looking for falling asleep to boring history, bedtime relaxation, and soft storytelling, then you have come to the right place. Tonight's journey will be a soft-spoken history documentary, a kind of calm bedtime storytelling where the details themselves are the lullaby. If this style of slow history helps you rest, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it truly brings you peace. I would love to hear in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is as you listen. It is strangely comforting to know who else is out there, perhaps thousands of miles apart, but drifting off to the same words, the same rhythms. Relaxing history to fall asleep to a history sleep story, a shared moment of stillness. So dim the lights. Let the world outside grow quiet. Perhaps you're a fan of Roman history, archaeology, or calm narration. Perhaps you're simply curious about how life once was. In either case, tonight's story will carry you gently back to an era before electricity, to a time when the question of light, how to make it, how to keep it, how to protect it, was one of the most important daily struggles. Long before the flick of a switch, before the hum of wires and the glow of lamps, there were torches, candles, oil lamps, and hearth fires. Each flame carefully tended, each glow hard-won from nature. Imagine yourself in a darkened chamber of centuries past, the walls thick with stone or timber, the floor uneven, the night air pressing in. Without the convenience of electricity, the evening hours belong to the shadows. And yet, humanity has always resisted the darkness. From the glow of a fire pit in a Bronze Age hut, to the guttering flame of a tallow candle in a medieval hall, to the careful trimming of a whale oil lamp in a 19th century parlor, the struggle to keep the night at bay shaped lives, economies, and even the imagination itself. Tonight, we will walk through these histories slowly. We will begin by stepping into the rhythm of daily life and see how ordinary people lit their homes and kept the dark at bay. Then we will turn to a life story, a figure bound to the world of illumination. Next, we will consider the mysteries, the archaeologies, the cultural curiosities left behind by ancient lighting. And finally, we will move into the world of the social and the elite, where great halls and palaces glowed while the poor remained in shadow. It is not a tale of battles or conquests, but of quiet persistence, of smoke and soot, of wick and wax, of oil and ember. The story of light before electricity is, in its own way, the story of humankind itself, a steady flame carried forward through time. So let us begin slowly, gently together. Close your eyes if you like. Breathe deeply. Settle into stillness. The past is waiting, and tonight it is illuminated only by the faint flicker of forgotten flames. Imagine, for a moment, returning to a world without the convenience of switches, wires, or bulbs. The sun has dipped below the horizon, and with its departure, the earth falls into darkness. Unlike the faint orange glow of modern cities that never quite sleep, the night in centuries past was deep and enveloping. Step outside, and the stars seem brighter, the moon more commanding. Step inside, however, and one finds only shadow, broken here and there by the stubborn gleam of a flame. For most people, this was the rhythm of daily life. Light was not a constant backdrop, as it is today. It was precious, something to be made and preserved, not taken for granted. The hearth was the primary source of illumination in countless homes across cultures and centuries. The fire was rarely allowed to die completely, for to rekindle it meant effort, skill, and time. Imagine the crackling warmth of logs or peat in a stone fireplace, or the sharp tang of smoke from burning dung in places where wood was scarce. The light itself was secondary to the heat, yet its glow reached out to every corner of the dwelling, offering just enough visibility to eat, to work, or to rest by. But not all light came from fires meant for cooking or warmth. Candles and oil lamps entered daily life in various forms, humble tools that became treasured companions in the dark. In medieval Europe, a tallow candle, crafted from rendered animal fat, was the common solution. It smoked and sputtered, filling the air with an acrid scent, and its waxy surface was often uneven. Yet for countless households, this small, imperfect flame was the only portable light. More prosperous families might use beeswax candles instead, which burned more cleanly and with a steadier flame. Their sweetness and scent and brightness and glow carried a subtle air of privilege, a luxury noticed immediately by those who could only afford tallow. Elsewhere, olive oil lamps dotted the Mediterranean world. Shaped from clay or bronze, their small reservoirs held oil that soaked into a fibrous wick. Imagine the flickering dance of such a lamp, the way its light softened the outlines of objects, elongating shadows across the plaster walls of a simple dwelling. In colder climates, where olive oil was rare, other oils were pressed into service. Whale oil, fish oil, even nut oils. Each had its own smell, its own qualities of brightness and smoke, its own practical limits. Daily routines adjusted themselves to these realities. The brightness of day was for labor in fields, workshops, or markets. At night, most tasks slowed or ceased, not simply because of fatigue, but because the struggle to light the way was too costly. The firewood, the candles, the oil, all were commodities that had to be preserved. To burn them carelessly was to court hardship. Thus, families gathered closely together at night, not only for warmth, but to share the glow of a single flame. Picture them seated in a rough circle around the hearth, perhaps a mother spinning wool, a father mending a tool, children leaning close to catch the thin stream of light upon their page or toy. The rhythm of their lives was bound tightly to this cycle of light and dark. Nighttime activities were therefore shaped by necessity. Reading, if one could read, was done sparingly. Writing was reserved for important matters. Crafting or mending was often left until morning. Even meals reflected this limitation, for cooking in the dim glow of a fire was slower, more cautious, more prone to mishap. Many households rose and slept in closer harmony with the sun than we do today. When darkness fell, the choice was either to stretch out the light with costly materials or to embrace the shadows and let sleep come early. The limitations of light also fostered a different kind of community. A single candle could illuminate not just a household, but a gathering. Neighbors might cluster together in one room for conversation or shared tasks. The act of borrowing flame was common, too. A candle carried across a lane, a coal borrowed from a neighbor's hearth. Fire and light were communal as much as they were individual, weaving a thread of reliance between people. Even in the wealthiest homes, the effort of tending light was constant. A candle needed trimming. A wick needed adjusting. An oil lamp needed to be refilled. A fire needed stoking. These small acts punctuated the hours, part of a steady rhythm as familiar as eating or breathing. In poorer dwellings, the struggle was sharper. A family might possess only a single candle, to be used sparingly. on nights of special need. That candle might be burned for longer, its wax diminishing rapidly, its flame dwindling before their eyes. One can imagine the sense of relief, or even triumph, when daylight finally returned and made the precious flame unnecessary. All of this paints a picture of a world where night truly was night. Deep, encompassing, often overwhelming. The small flames of hearth, candle, or lamp offered not just visibility, but comfort, companionship, even hope. The darkness could be unsettling, full of imagined dangers or very real ones. Yet within each home, a faint, flickering light held back the night, allowing ordinary life to continue in a slower, softer rhythm than our modern eyes can easily imagine. And so, as we linger here in the dim-lit homes of the past, let us notice how fragile and yet how meaningful that glow was. Every flame mattered. Every flicker was a victory against the dark. And every household, whether in a bustling town or a lonely farmstead, was united by this same nightly ritual, the tending of light. As we settle more deeply into this quiet world, it helps to imagine not only the presence of light, but also its absence. In many parts of Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas, nights without firelight were common, especially for the poor. The absence of flame meant the total surrender to darkness, an enveloping blackness that most of us, accustomed to street lamps and electronic screens, have rarely experienced. The rhythm of life conformed to this reality. The day ended earlier, and the night stretched longer. People often spoke of first sleep and second sleep, two distinct periods of rest separated by a brief waking in the middle of the night, a pattern that made sense in a world guided by natural light. During that waking interval, a candle might be lit to pray, to check on livestock, or to share quiet conversation, before returning once more to slumber. Yet within that darkness, the presence of even the smallest flame could reshape an entire space. Picture a clay lamp in a Roman domus, the oil wick glowing faintly and throwing amber patterns against painted walls. The soft hiss of the oil feeding the flame becomes part of the night's soundtrack, blending with the distant bark of a dog or the creak of timbers in the cool air. In an early Islamic household, imagine the clean fragrance of olive oil burning steadily in a bronze lamp suspended from a ceiling hook. The lamp's design itself was an art form, with flowing calligraphic patterns and geometric cutouts that allowed light to dance in intricate shapes. Different cultures approached the challenge of light in inventive ways. In medieval Japan, for example, lamps fueled by rapeseed oil or candles of plant-based wax created a softer, subtler light, often filtered through shoji screens. The glow was indirect, diffused, and harmonious with architectural spaces that valued tranquility. In Scandinavia, where winters brought long months of darkness, fish oil lamps were common. Their flames were steady but carried a pungent smell, something endured rather than enjoyed. One can almost imagine the mingling sense of dried fish, oil, and smoke permeating a modest home. Light was not merely practical. It carried symbolic meaning. In Christian Europe, the candle was deeply tied to ritual. The illumination of churches, the procession of holy days, the solemn vigil. In Hindu households, the diya lamp became part of spiritual life, the small flame representing purity and divine presence. Across traditions, fire and light were metaphors for hope, guidance, and sacredness. To burn a candle or lamp was not simply to see, but to connect with something beyond the physical. Daily life, then, contained both the mundane and the spiritual dimensions of flame. Still, the practical challenges persisted. so it built up on ceilings and walls. Air grew thick with smoke in poorly ventilated homes. Flames could easily set straw roofs or wooden beams alight, creating dangers that demanded constant vigilance. Children were often warned to keep their distance, yet the household flame remained central to family life. Women, in many societies, carried the responsibility of tending lamps and candles, trimming wicks, and ensuring that the evening hours did not slip entirely into shadow. There is also the matter of cost. In London, for example, candles were not only household necessities, but commodities sold in markets. Records show that households often budgeted carefully for lighting, deciding how many hours of candlelight could be afforded each evening. Imagine choosing whether to burn 2 candles for greater brightness or to save wax by making do with just one. The decision carried consequences not only for visibility, but also for how time was spent. Entire evenings might be passed in near darkness to conserve supplies. In wealthier homes, the contrast was striking. Dozens of beeswax candles could be set ablaze in chandeliers, transforming dining halls into luminous spaces. Oil lamps of polished metal reflected and amplified their glow. The experience of night was utterly different for those with means. Bright, almost festive, while the poor knew a darkness far deeper and more confining. This contrast shaped not only comfort, but also opportunity. Literacy, for instance, was far easier to pursue in homes where candles were abundant. Creativity, record-keeping, even correspondence, all flourished where light was plentiful. In poorer homes, such activities were often confined to daylight hours, constraining the rhythm of intellectual life itself. And yet, even in the humblest dwellings, people adapted with ingenuity. Rushlights, for example, were common in parts of Britain and Northern Europe. Reeds or rushes dipped in animal fat burned slowly, providing a frugal alternative to candles. Their flame was small and brief, but sufficient for simple tasks. Pine splinters served a similar role in some regions, offering a bright but smoky glow for a short time. Every culture developed its own improvisations, shaped by local resources and needs. To imagine yourself in such a home is to notice the sensory world it created. The smell of smoke lingering in fabrics. The glow of firelight reflected in polished metal or clay surfaces. The subtle crackle of a wick adjusting itself in the oil. The way faces took on a sculpted quality in the half-light, expressions softened by shadow. Nighttime conversation was gentler, less hurried, for the darkness itself seemed to slow the pace of thought. The modern sense of rushing through evening hours simply did not exist. Instead, there was patience, acceptance, and intimacy with the quiet of the night. So as we sit with these images, the glow of a single lamp, the careful trimming of a wick, the shared silence of a family gathered close, we come to understand how much light shaped daily life, not only in what it allowed, but in what it restricted. In those moments of flicker and shadow, the human relationship with time, with labor, and with one another was forged in ways both subtle and profound. This was the ordinary miracle of light before electricity. Fragile, costly, yet endlessly meaningful. Let us linger a while longer in these evenings of the past, where light was not so much a backdrop as a presence in itself. To modern eyes, accustomed to constant brightness, the glow of a flame might appear meager. But to those who lived by it, the light was alive. It shimmered, it moved, it demanded attention. There was no such thing as a perfectly steady glow. Candles guttered, flames leaned with the draft of a window, lamps sputtered as oil ran low. Each flicker was a reminder of the fragility of illumination, a reminder that the night was always waiting just beyond the edge of the flame. In the humbler cottages, where families gathered after a day's labor, light was rationed with care. A single rushlight might stand in the center of the room, its pale flame serving multiple purposes at once: to allow sewing, to keep an eye on supper simmering in the pot, to let children play quietly before bed. Work did not end with the setting of the sun, but it transformed, taking on a slower rhythm. Spinning, weaving, or mending could continue, but with pauses, with adjustments, with patience. The eyes strained in half-light. The hands grew tired more quickly. Yet this slower pace itself shaped culture. Evenings became times for storytelling, for shared memory, for song. Oral tradition flourished in darkness, punctuated only by firelight. In cities, where homes crowded close and resources varied, the experience was more diverse. Some houses flickered with multiple lamps, creating a patchwork of light that spilled out through windows into the narrow lanes. Others sat in almost complete shadow, a faint glow barely enough to mark their doorways. The contrast gave nighttime streets an uneven character, some alleys full of shadow, others glowing faintly with the warmth of interior lamps. Step into a medieval town at night, and you would find yourself surrounded by alternating pools of light and darkness, each flame a small island of visibility in a sea of shadow. The soundscape was part of this experience too. Without modern hums and buzzes, the crackle of firewood was a dominant sound. The faint hiss of burning oil, the occasional pop of a candle wick, the soft scraping of a knife trimming wax. These small noises defined the atmosphere of evening. They blended with the natural night. The chirp of insects, the hoot of owls, the bark of distant dogs. Altogether, it was a world quieter than ours, but never silent, filled with subtle layers of sound that felt more pronounced in the dark. In wealthier households, evenings were opportunities for display. Imagine a great hall illuminated by dozens of beeswax candles, their flames mirrored in polished silver dishes and goblets. Guests would dine, converse, and admire the shimmering atmosphere, the abundance of light itself a statement of wealth. In palaces and noble estates, elaborate chandeliers held scores of candles, each one tended by servants to ensure a steady glow. The labor of keeping so many flames burning was immense. Wicks trimmed, wax replaced, drips cleaned away, but the impression it gave was one of abundance, safety, and prestige. To be bathed in light was, quite literally, a luxury. Yet beyond the differences of wealth, there was a shared human intimacy with fire and flame. Children drifted to sleep watching the dance of shadows on walls. Lovers spoke in whispers beside the fading glow of a lamp. Elders recited stories passed down through generations, their faces carved into solemnity by the lines of light and shadow. In every culture, across time and place, the fragile flame bound people together in moments of closeness. The dangers were ever present, and everyone knew them. A candle left untended could fall, and in a world built largely of wood and thatch, disaster was swift. Many towns passed laws dictating when fires had to be extinguished or where open flames could be used. Fire watches patrolled city streets, listening for cries of alarm. In smaller communities, neighbors rushed to one another's aid when flame grew out of control. Thus the light that sustained life also carried risk, a reminder of its dual nature, nourishing and destructive at once. But perhaps the most enduring truth of pre-electric evenings was their rhythm. Light was never infinite, never permanent. A candle burned down, an oil lamp ran dry, a hearth fire needed feeding. The coming of darkness was not optional, and its return each evening marked the cycle of life itself. People measure time not in hours and minutes, but in the length of a candle in the number of logs remaining, in the sputtering end of a rushlight. That was not banished, only softened, only delayed. The darkness was a constant companion, shaping thought, behavior, and even imagination. To live in that world was to know both the comfort and the fragility of light. Imagine yourself seated in such a room, watching a candle melt away. The wax softens, drips, hardens again. The flame shrinks, wavers, then steadies once more. Around you, others share the moment. Perhaps a grandparent nodding slowly, perhaps a child leaning close to the circle of glow. The air smells faintly of smoke, tinged with sweetness or with sharpness, depending on the material burned. Shadows lengthen and shorten as the flame trembles. Slowly, the flame lowers, the night gathers. And when it finally sputters out, darkness returns, not frightening, but inevitable, familiar, and complete. This was daily life before electricity, a world illuminated not by abundance, but by scarcity. A world where every flame mattered. A world where night was not erased, but respected, accepted, and lived alongside. And so the rhythm of human lives for centuries was written in flicker and shadow, in glow and in gloom. When we turn from the ordinary homes and cottages of the past to the lives of those who experimented, innovated, and created, one name glimmers faintly in the annals of history. Al-Jazari, an inventor from the late 12th and early 13th centuries. He lived in what is now southeastern Turkey, serving as chief engineer to the Artukid dynasty, rulers of a modest but thriving state. His full name, Badi al-Zaman Abu al-Ibn Ismail Ibn al-Razaz al-Jazari, carries with it the cadence of a scholar, an artisan, and a man of reputation. Al-Jazari was, above all, a maker of machines. His most famous work, the Book of Knowledge of Ingenious Mechanical Devices, written in 1206, describes over 100 mechanisms: water clocks, automata, fountains, and pumps. Many of them relied not only on water and gears, but also on the careful control of flame. In his world, light and mechanics intertwined in subtle ways. The glow of a lamp could illuminate the face of a clock, marking the passage of time through flame as much as through water. To imagine Al-Jazari at his workbench is to picture a man surrounded by parchment diagrams, bronze fittings, clay models, and tools of wood and iron. The faint flame of an oil lamp illuminates his hands as he sketches and tests. The scent of olive oil, smoke, and metal mingles in the air. In such an environment, light was not simply a tool for vision, it was part of the mechanism itself. Some of his devices used candles as weights, burning slowly to alter balance and movement. Others used lamps not only for function, but for beauty, as in his intricate water clocks that glowed with tiny flames marking the hours. One of his celebrated inventions was a candle clock, with a steady consumption of wax served as a measure of time. A candle was mounted inside a cylinder marked with graduations. As it burned, the descending level of wax revealed the passage of hours. Imagine a quiet chamber where this device stood, the candle glowing softly, its steady reduction an invisible metronome. The flame itself became both illumination and timekeeper, uniting two of the central human struggles before electricity, light and order. His great water clocks, too, sometimes incorporated lamps. The castle clock, for example, is often considered one of the earliest programmable analog computers. It not only displayed time, but also included automata that moved and performed tasks. Oil lamps flickered within, adding spectacle to function. Visitors would watch in amazement as figures emerged, as sounds marked the hour, and as flames illuminated the intricate display. To see such a clock by night, with lamps glowing through its ornate frame, must have been a wonder that fused utility and art, science and spectacle. Al-Jazari's life itself remains partly veiled in shadow. Like many artisans of the medieval world, little is known beyond his works. Yet from his writings we glimpse a personality both practical and imaginative. He did not only describe his machines, he explained how they might be built step by step. His book is part manual, part vision. It reveals a man deeply engaged with solving everyday problems: how to raise water, how to keep time, how to manage light. His ingenuity illustrates a truth of human history, that even in eras when resources were scarce, creativity shone brightly. In reflecting on his work, we might pause to imagine his evenings. Did he sit, perhaps, in the courtyard of his home, surrounded by the low glow of oil lamps, discussing ideas with apprentices or patrons? Did he test his devices late into the night, candlelight casting giant shadows of gears and levers across the walls? The historian cannot be certain, but it is easy to picture him in these moments of quiet concentration, shaping mechanisms whose influence would ripple through centuries. Al-Jazari was not alone, of course. Across cultures, other inventors experimented with ways to measure, conserve, or enhance light. In China, the ingenious use of oil lamps for timekeeping can be traced back centuries. In Europe, monastic scholars designed elaborate candelabra and lampstands to aid their studies in the scriptorium. Yet Al-Jazari's meticulous documentation allows us to see, more clearly than most, the interplay of science, art, and illumination. His work represents the meeting point between necessity and imagination. To place him within the broader rhythm of life before electricity is to recognize how exceptional minds responded to universal challenges. Light was scarce, costly, and fragile. But in the hands of someone like Al-Jazari, it became not only useful, but beautiful. A candle could mark the passage of time. A lamp could transform a mechanism into a performance. The faint glow of flame could become a language of innovation. And so, as we follow this figure into the shadowed halls of history, we begin to understand that the story of light before electricity is not only about survival. It is also about creativity, invention, and the human desire to shape beauty from necessity. Al-Jazari, by combining flame, water, and mechanism, gave to his world a glimpse of what was possible when imagination worked hand in hand with illumination. When we think of the story of light before electricity, it is easy to imagine nameless households and countless flames. But there were also particular people whose names still flicker across the centuries. Individuals who dedicated their lives to shaping how humans lit their homes, their cities, and their imaginations. One such figure is Am Argand, an 18th century Swiss physicist and chemist. In 1780, he introduced a lamp design that transformed the very experience of illumination. Until then, most oil lamps smoked heavily, producing dim and uneven flames. Argand's innovation was deceptively simple: a cylindrical wick surrounded by a glass chimney that directed airflow. This allowed the flame to burn hotter, brighter, and with far less smoke. The Argand lamp was said to produce 10 times the light of a single candle, and it quickly spread across Europe. Imagine the astonishment of a household accustomed to faint, sputtering lamps when this new device filled the room with a steady brilliance. For the wealthy, it was a revelation. For scholars, it meant longer hours of reading and writing by night. For merchants, it extended the working day. The Argand lamp became so influential that even Napoleon Bonaparte took an interest. He recognized that better lighting meant better productivity, both in civilian life and in military contexts. To To walk through Paris in the early 19th century, after Argan's design had taken hold, was to see a city transformed. Where once narrow streets had been shrouded in gloom, now glass-chimneyed lamps cast a more reliable glow. It was not the abundance of electrobulbs we know today, but it was a step closer. The flame was still fragile, still vulnerable to wind and to cost, but it represented progress born of human ingenuity. Another figure who played a role in the long transition from flame to more modern light was William Murdoch, a Scottish engineer working in the late 18th century. Murdoch is remembered for his pioneering experiments with coal gas as a fuel for illumination. In 1792, he successfully lit his home in Cornwall using gas lamps of his own design. The novelty of this achievement cannot be overstated. Light created not by burning oil or wax, but by channeling gas. By the turn of the century, entire factories and later city streets began to adopt gas lighting, changing the urban landscape forever. To imagine London, Berlin, or New York in the early 19th century is to see streets that had been nearly impassable after dusk now lined with glowing lamps, their flames shielded by glass, their lights stretching farther than candles ever could. Even so, these innovators were building upon centuries of quieter, smaller contributions by unnamed craftsmen, artisans, and householders. The making of candles, for instance, was both a trade and a craft. In medieval Europe, guilds of chandlers regulated the production and sale of candles, ensuring quality and availability. In the Islamic world, lamp makers shaped clay and bronze into intricate forms that combine beauty with function. Their names may not have survived in the records, but their skill illuminated countless nights. Writers, too, left behind glimpses of how light shaped their lives. Samuel Pepys, the 17th century English diarist, often mentioned the candles and lamps that framed his evenings. His descriptions remind us how closely personal memory was tied to the faint glow of flame. Likewise, in Japanese poetry of the Edo period, the soft shimmer of lantern light became a recurring image, symbolizing both transience and intimacy. To light a lamp was not only a physical act, but a poetic one, imbued with meaning. Consider also the architects and builders who thought carefully about how spaces interacted with natural and artificial light. Cathedrals in Europe were designed with windows that filled daytime interiors with stained glass color. But at night, candlelight took over. The flicker of thousands of small flames turned these vast stone chambers into shimmering sanctuaries. The placement of lamps and chandeliers was deliberate, guiding worshippers' eyes toward altars and icons. In palaces, architects designed mirrored surfaces to reflect and magnify the glow of candles, creating the illusion of greater brilliance. It is easy, in retrospect, to view these steps as inevitable progress toward the electric light bulb. But for those who lived through them, each innovation was transformative. The argan lamp, the gas light, even the refinement of wax production, all were revolutions in their own right. Each extended the boundaries of night, allowing people to work, to study, to socialize, and to dream in hours once ruled only by shadow. What unites these figures, Argand, Murdoch, the guildsmen, the poets, the architects, is not simply their technical achievement, but their recognition of light as more than utility. They understood its symbolic power, its social role, its intimate presence in human life. To improve a lamp was not merely to brighten a room. It was to shape the way people lived, thought, and remembered. And so, when we speak of the history of light before electricity, we do not only speak of objects. We speak of individuals, some remembered, many forgotten, whose ingenuity or artistry allowed humanity to hold the darkness at bay for a few more hours each night. Their contributions remind us that even the faintest flame can change the course of a life, or of a city, or of a world. By the 19th century, the world of light had entered a curious twilight phase. Not yet electric, yet no longer bound solely to the simple candle and oil lamp. This was an age of experimentation, of half measures and incremental advances, where inventors and governments alike sought to tame the darkness with ever brighter, ever cheaper methods. It was a time when one could walk the streets of Paris or London and see both the glow of familiar flames and the new, hissing lamps of gaslight competing for dominance. The spread of gaslight was itself a remarkable story. Though William Murdoch had proven the concept at the close of the 18th century, it was not until the early 19th century that entire cities were transformed. In 1807, Pall Mall in London became the first street in the world lit by gas lamps, a novelty that soon drew curious crowds. Imagine the strangeness of it. To walk along what had always been a dim and uncertain road, now suddenly illuminated by a row of bright, steady flames encased in glass. Nighttime became less threatening. Commerce extended further into the evening, and cities began to feel alive long after sunset. Yet, the gaslight revolution was not without its difficulties. Pipes leaked, accidents occurred, and the new fuel was expensive. For many households, the candle and the oil lamp still reigned supreme. Wealth determined the kind of light one enjoyed. In poorer homes, rushlights, slender reeds dipped in animal fat, continued to burn, casting only the faintest glow. In middle-class homes, a few argan lamps or tallow candles might illuminate the parlor. The wealthy, by contrast, might enjoy chandeliers filled with dozens of wax candles or entire suites of rooms lit with gaslight, a display not only of brightness but of status. The individuals behind these transitions were numerous, but some stand out. Sir Humphrey Davy, for example, is remembered today primarily for his contributions to chemistry, but in 1802 he demonstrated the first form of what would eventually become electric light, the arc lamp. Though impractical at the time, blindingly bright and requiring immense amounts of current, it hinted at a future where light might no longer rely on flame at all. The audience who witnessed Davy's experiment could hardly have known that they were glimpsing the beginnings of a revolution that would one day make candles almost obsolete. In parallel, other inventors sought not to abandon flame, but to perfect it. New types of lamp burners were tested. Reflectors were introduced to direct light more efficiently. Chimneys of different shapes were designed to maximize brightness and minimize smoke. The pursuit of light was not just about science, but also about comfort, convenience, and beauty. The act of lighting a lamp, once entirely ordinary, was becoming part of a broader cultural shift toward controlling the environment at will. But for most people, daily life was less about these grand inventions and more about the small routines of illumination. Consider the lamplighters who, each evening, walked through towns and cities with long poles tipped with flames, reaching up to light each gas lamp in turn. Their profession became a symbol of urban life in the 19th century. Children would watch them with fascination, seeing darkness pushed back step by step, lamp by lamp. And in the early morning hours, those same lamplighters would return to snuff the flames, restoring the natural rhythm of daybreak. Travelers of the period often recorded their impressions of light in new places. A visitor to Vienna might note the brilliance of its gaslit streets compared to the shadowy lanes of a smaller town. An American arriving in Paris could marvel at the grand boulevards glowing at night, describing them as rivers of fire. In diaries and letters, light became a measure of progress and civilization. Where there was brightness, there was safety, modernity, and the promise of advancement. Where there was darkness, there lingered danger, poverty, and tradition. Cultural life, too, adapted to these changes. Theaters, for example, benefited enormously from better lighting. Candles had long been used on stage, but they produced smoke, uneven shadows, and constant risk of fire. With gaslight, performances became more vivid, audiences could see more clearly, and stagecraft entered a new era. Yet, there remained an unmistakable romance to candlelight. The way it softened edges, created intimacy, and reminded people of earlier centuries. Many households, even when gas became available, clung to their candles not only out of habit but out of preference. In the homes of the wealthy, particularly in Victorian England, elaborate chandeliers with dozens or even hundreds of candles were symbols of prestige. Servants worked tirelessly to keep them trimmed, replaced, and lit. Imagine the effort required. A grand dining hall prepared for a banquet. Every candle carefully placed, each wick lit in succession, until the room glowed with a shimmering, golden haze. Guests would arrive not only to dine, but to bask in the spectacle of light itself. For the host, it was not merely illumination, but a declaration of wealth and refinement. All of these threads, the inventors, the lamplighters, the cultural adaptations, the household rituals, form part of the biography of light before electricity. Each individual, each event, contributed in its own small way to the long journey. And through their combined efforts, humanity stood at the edge of a threshold. The centuries of oil, wax, and flame were drawing to a close, though few could have known it. Soon, the electric bulb would appear, ushering in a new era where darkness could be banished at the flick of a switch. For those living in the 19th century, however, the story was not about bulbs or switches. It was about the daily presence of flame, whether in the humble rushlight or the grand chandelier, the smoky gas lamp or the experimental arc. It was about the figures who experimented and dreamed, and the countless others who carried candles through hallways, tended wicks, and struck flints night after night. It was about the glow that defined their evenings, their gatherings, their solitude. And so, as this segment draws to a close, we leave behind the inventors and the lamplighters, the gaslit boulevards and the candlelit halls, holding in our imagination a world where darkness was never entirely defeated, but constantly negotiated, one flame at a time. There's always more to light than its simple, practical glow. Across centuries, fire and flame carried with them not only warmth and visibility, but also layers of meaning, ritual, symbolism, even mystery. To walk through the story of light before electricity is not only to follow the thread of human ingenuity, but to glimpse the ways in which people saw flame as something almost alive. Consider the earliest archaeological evidence of controlled fire. Within caves, traces of soot cling to stone walls, blackened by torches held thousands of years ago. Archaeologists studying Paleolithic sites have discovered that smoke patterns on ceilings often correspond with areas where paintings appear, suggesting that flickering torchlight may have been part of the creative process itself. Imagine those scenes, deep underground, far from daylight, figures of bison and horses taking shape by the wavering glow of fire, the shadows of artists moving across the rock. To those ancient painters, light was more than utility. It was a collaborator casting motion and spirit into their art. Moving forward in time, we encounter the oil lamps of antiquity, small terracotta vessels, some plain, others decorated with motifs of gods, animals, or mythological scenes. Thousands have been uncovered in the ruins of Roman houses, temples, and graves. For archaeologists, These objects are keys to daily life, but also to ritual practice. Lamps were often left as offerings to deities or placed in tombs to accompany the dead. Inscriptions sometimes asked the flame to guide the spirit on its journey. In this sense, light was not only a means of seeing in the dark, but a bridge between worlds, the living and the departed, the human and the divine. In Greek myth, Prometheus stole fire from the gods to give it to humanity, an act of defiance that transformed human destiny. In Roman religion, the eternal flame of Vesta burned within her temple, tended by priestesses who ensured it never went out. In Zoroastrian tradition, fire was revered as a pure and sacred element, representing truth and divine presence. Across cultures, the steady glow of a flame became a symbol of continuity, eternity, and the presence of something greater than ordinary life. Archaeological discoveries often highlight the care with which light was cultivated. In the ruins of Pompeii, carbonized remains of wooden candelabra have been found, their elegant forms preserved by volcanic ash. Bronze lampstands with intricate design survive, evidence that even practical tools could carry artistic beauty. Excavations in ancient Egypt reveal lamps shaped like lotus blossoms, symbolic of rebirth and the rising sun. Each artifact whispers a cultural meaning: light as rebirth, as protection, as divine witness. The mystery lies not only in the physical remains, but in what those flames once meant to the people who lit them. Imagine standing in a temple 2,000 years ago, oil lamps flickering along the walls, casting rhythmic shadows as priests carried out their rituals. To modern eyes, it is dim, but to ancient worshippers, the interplay of shadow and flame was intentional, an atmosphere shaped to inspire reverence, awe, and connection with the divine. Even in the Middle Ages, candles were more than mere tools. The church, with its vast stone spaces, filled them with candlelight that glittered against gilded icons and illuminated manuscripts. Each flame represented prayer, devotion, or the soul of a believer. The act of lighting a candle became a ritual of hope and memory. A single taper placed before a shrine was not only a light in the darkness, but a message carried upward, a petition made visible. Legends and folklore across Europe spoke of ghostly lights, will-o'-the-wisps, said to lead travelers astray in marshes, or strange lights seen on battlefields, believed to be the souls of the dead. These tales reveal how humans projected meaning onto natural flames, finding mystery in the unexplained. Even the ordinary candle could acquire symbolic weight, its extinguishing seen as an omen, its guttering flame a sign of unseen presence. Archaeologists sometimes uncover lamps in unexpected contexts, like hidden caches beneath thresholds or within walls, suggesting acts of superstition or protection. To bury a lamp may have been to trap light, to ward off darkness, or to seal in luck. Such practices remind us that for much of history, light was not guaranteed. To own it, preserve it, or even conceal, it could carry meaning beyond our modern comprehension. The cultural memory of light is woven, too, into literature and poetry. Ancient writers described banquets glowing with oil lamps, their guests reclining in golden haze. Medieval chroniclers recorded the shimmering of cathedral interiors at feast days when hundreds of candles blazed at once. Renaissance poets compared the beloved to the steady flame of a lamp, enduring through the night. Each reference reminds us that light, before it was ever a switch on a wall, was a living presence, part of the human emotional landscape. And so, the archaeology of flame is more than shards of terracotta or soot-stained walls. It is the study of reverence, of memory, of how light was woven into the structure of meaning itself. To this day, when we light a candle for reflection, remembrance, or prayer, we echo the actions of countless generations before us. We are not only illuminating a room, we are partaking in an ancient conversation with fire, one that reaches back into caves, temples, and cathedrals. When we think about light, we must also think about its twin, darkness. For most of human history, the fall of night brought with it not only rest, but uncertainty, imagination, and mystery. Where the flame ended, shadow began. And in those shadows, the mind filled in what the eye could not see. To live in a world before electric light was to live in cycles of day and night more absolute than we can easily imagine today. Archaeologists studying the rhythms of ancient settlements often note the evidence of nighttime boundaries. Hearths, lamps, and torches were arranged with care, not only to provide illumination, but to push back the unknown. The darkness was not simply an absence of light. It was a living presence filled with sounds, shapes, and possibilities. Owls calling in the distance, the shuffle of unseen animals, the creak of wood in the wind, all became amplified when the flame dwindled low. Cultures across the globe developed rituals to soften the edge of night. In Northern Europe, midsummer bonfires marked the turning of the seasons. Great communal flames lit to protect against evil spirits and to celebrate the triumph of daylight. In Japan, the Obon festival honored ancestral spirits, often with lanterns floated gently on water, glowing points of remembrance drifting into darkness. In India, the festival of Diwali still celebrates the victory of light over shadow, rows of small oil lamps burning in windows, courtyards, and streets, a tradition whose roots stretch back for centuries. Each of these customs reminds us that light was more than a tool. It was protection, reassurance, and meaning against the vastness of night. The symbolism of flame carried into the realm of storytelling. In medieval Europe, the hearth became the natural gathering place for tales. The glow of fire framed the narrator's face, while listeners sat in a semicircle, their own features half in light, half in shadow. Folklore often emerged in this liminal space. Ghost stories, cautionary legends, or myths of heroes who carried torches into the underworld. To this day, the phrase telling stories around the fire carries echoes of that ancient intimacy. Archaeological finds sometimes preserve traces of this world of shadow. Charcoal deposits in Viking longhouses show where central hearths once glowed, smoke holes venting the fire into the darkened rafters above. Residues of lamp oil on shards of pottery indicate repeated use, night after night, to hold a fragile circle of flame against the void. These fragments remind us that for every great temple lamp or ornate candle holder, there were countless ordinary fires, flickering in small rooms, seen by ordinary eyes. The mystery of darkness was not always fearful. It could also be sacred. In Egypt, the night sky was envisioned as a goddess stretching over the earth, her body studded with stars. Darkness was the canvas upon which light revealed itself. In Christian mysticism, the dark night of the soul became a metaphor for spiritual trial and transformation, where divine light could eventually break through. In Islamic tradition, the Quran describes God as the light of the heavens and the earth, a metaphor drawn from the experience of lamps burning in the night. What makes light powerful is not its brilliance alone, but its fragility. A candle flame gutters easily in a draft. A lamp runs dry if oil is not carefully preserved. In ancient cities, the extinguishing of a central flame could bring real disruption, forcing households to beg or borrow fire from neighbors. That dependence bred customs of sharing and community, one home's light becoming another's. Archaeological evidence of fire transfer rituals, such as the Olympic flame in Greece or the relighting of sacred hearths, points to the way societies tied continuity of light to continuity of life itself. Literature preserves this awareness. Writers across ages described lamps failing at midnight, the anxious search for more oil, or the small relief when flame finally steadied again. Even Shakespeare compared human life to a candle, fragile and brief, subject to sudden extinguishing. The metaphor resonates precisely because everyone knew what it meant to watch a flame falter in darkness. In folklore, mysterious lights in the night sky were often explained through imagination. Comets, meteors, or auroras became omens, portents, or divine signs. Travelers told of phantom lanterns leading them astray, lights that appeared just beyond reach, then vanished when pursued. These tales, though shaped by superstition, grew naturally from the deep entanglement of human experience with the uncertain landscape of darkness. Yet not all encounters with night were fearful. The very act of watching stars, planets, and the slow sweep of the Milky Way across a black sky offered perspective. Without artificial light, the heavens were more vivid, more overwhelming, and more present in daily life. Ancient calendars, agricultural cycles, and navigation all depended on the contrast between darkness and light. Archaeological alignments, such as Stonehenge or the Sun Temples of the Americas, testify to this awareness. These monuments are reminders that darkness itself was not a void to be feared, but a partner in the eternal rhythm of light. To imagine this world is to sense the rhythm of an older existence. Light and shadow working together, shaping culture, inspiring stories, and sustaining communities. A world where flame was both fragile and eternal, where night was both mystery and sanctuary. And perhaps, even as we sit now in rooms where darkness is banished by the flick of a switch, part of us longs for that more elemental relationship, to see the world again in flickering circles of firelight, to hear the night pressing in, and to find reassurance in a small but steady flame. Among the most fascinating aspects of studying ancient lighting is not only what we know, but what remains uncertain. Archaeologists uncover fragments, lamps, sconces, charred remains of wicks, but often the full story of how these objects were used is elusive. The silence of the past leaves us with questions that can never be fully answered, mysteries that flicker like the flames they once held. Take, for example, the intricate terracotta lamps discovered in Roman houses, temples, and burial chambers. Many are decorated with symbolic images, dolphins, gladiators, mythological scenes, or even erotic motifs. Yet the meaning of these decorations is debated. Were they chosen simply because they please the eye, or did they carry deeper significance, casting stories into the very shadows they created on walls? A lamp bearing an image of Hercules might have reassured a family of strength and protection, while a lamp with a theater mask might have reminded them of joy and performance. We cannot know for certain, but the speculation itself opens a window into how light and culture intertwined. In the tombs of ancient Egypt, archaeologists have found oil lamps placed carefully near the dead, sometimes still holding traces of resin or animal fat used as fuel. Were these lamps meant to guide the departed through darkness into the afterlife? Or were they symbolic gestures, expressions of care for the journey ahead? The imagery carved into Egyptian art suggests both possibilities. The flame as both literal and spiritual illumination, a fragile beacon against eternal night. From Greece, there are puzzles of function as well as meaning. Some surviving lamps are so tiny they could hold only a few drops of oil. Do they serve practical purposes at all, or were they purely symbolic offerings? Others were designed with multiple nozzles, allowing several wicks to burn at once. Perhaps they lit small shrines or household altars, where steady flames were offerings to the gods. Yet without written testimony, we can only imagine the warm glow of these clustered flames, reflected in polished bronze, flickering against painted walls. Another enduring mystery comes from prehistoric Europe. Caves such as Lascaux and Chauvet contain paintings deep in the earth, far from natural daylight. How were these created without illumination? Archaeologists have experimented with reproductions of simple lamps carved from stone, filled with animal fat and plant wicks. These lamps emit a gentle, steady glow, enough to light a cavern chamber without filling it with smoke. To picture ancient painters crouched beneath such light, carefully applying pigments, is to glimpse both the practicality and the spiritual resonance of fire. The lamps were not merely tools. They were conduits, extending the reach of human vision into the hidden places of the earth. There are also stories of absence. In many sites, lamps appear in some rooms, but not others, leaving us to wonder how families divided their illumination. Did they cluster together in lamplight during the evenings, leaving other chambers dark and silent? Or did each person carry a small flame when needed, shifting between zones of light and shadow? The arrangement of lampstands and wall brackets in excavated Roman villas suggests a carefully planned choreography of brightness and dimness, shaping mood and activity in ways we can only partially reconstruct. Even in the medieval period, records describe mysteries that still puzzle historians. In monasteries, for instance, the ever-burning lamps of certain shrines were said to glow without ceasing. Were these simply maintained by diligent monks, or were they early experiments in unusual fuels? Alchemists speculated about perpetual lights, concoctions of secret oils that would never fade. Such tales reveal the deep fascination with flame, its seeming life, and its tantalizing fragility. Across cultures, light often carried a symbolic weight far beyond its practical value. In Hindu rituals, the act of lighting a lamp is considered an offering to the divine, a way of inviting auspicious presence into a home. In Zoroastrianism, fire temples preserve sacred flames that must never be extinguished, tended generation after generation. These traditions leave us with questions as enduring as the flames themselves. Was the power of light found in its physical properties, or in the meanings humans projected onto it? Archaeological puzzles persist even in the simplest objects. A lump of hardened clay might once have been molded into a crude lamp, but without context, it could be mistaken for something else entirely. Charcoal fragments may be from a fire for warmth, or from a lamp lit to guide a ritual. Every discovery is like a faint ember, glowing faintly across centuries, whispering of stories we can never fully recover. And yet, perhaps this is part of the comfort these mysteries provide. Just as flame itself trembles between steadiness and disappearance, our knowledge of the past trembles between certainty and imagination. The unknown invites reflection, much as the shifting dance of candlelight invites contemplation. To study these fragments is to sit quietly with history, allowing its shadows to speak as softly as its light. As you picture these archaeological finds, lamps carved with dolphins, lamps so small they barely held oil, lamps flickering in the tombs of kings. Imagine how their light once moved across faces now long gone. Imagine the walls alive with shadow, the gentle rhythm of wicks burning low, and the silence of people pausing to watch their own thoughts flicker in the fire. These objects remind us that history is not only recorded in words, but in the play of light across darkness, in the fragile circle of flame that once sustained both body and spirit. When we consider the history of light before electricity, one of the most revealing contrasts is how differently the wealthy and the poor experienced it. The presence or absence of illumination was not only a matter of convenience. It reflected broader patterns of inequality, status, and power. To understand this divide, imagine two households, both living in the same city, yet separated by their means of creating and sustaining light. In the home of a wealthy Roman senator, the evening began with servants moving quietly from room to room, trimming wicks and replenishing oil. Bronze lampstands gleamed in the glow, polished to reflect every spark. In the grand dining room, several lamps might be lit at once, placed on high stands or suspended from chains to cast steady light across mosaic floors and richly painted walls. The senator's guests reclined on couches, enjoying the luxury of visibility long after sunset. The room was filled not only with conversation, but with light itself, a rare commodity, elevated into a symbol of refinement. By contrast, in the cramped apartment of a laborer across the city, light was sparse and uncertain. Perhaps one small terracotta lamp was lit, its single wick struggling to hold steady against drafts. The oil, often of poor quality, might sputter and smoke, filling the air with a faint, acrid scent. The flame barely reached the far corners of the room, leaving shadows thick and unmoving. A family gathered close, working, talking, or resting within this narrow circle of light. Beyond it, darkness pressed in. For them, each drop of oil was precious, to be stretched as long as possible. Nighttime was not a realm of leisure, but of necessary retreat. This divide was not confined to Rome. In medieval Europe, wealthy households displayed their means with candles made of beeswax. These burned cleanly and brightly, producing a clear, golden glow with little smoke. To dine by beeswax candlelight was to dine in luxury, for beeswax was costly, gathered in limited supply from carefully tended hives. The scent was subtle, sweet, almost ceremonial. Poorer families, meanwhile, relied on tallow candles made from animal fat. These smoked, sputtered, and carried a strong odor, sometimes unpleasant. For many, they were unaffordable even then. Instead, rushlights, thin stalks of dried plants dipped in fat, offered brief, uneven flames. A rushlight might last only a short while, needing constant attention, its flicker more fragile than steady. The contrast extended beyond material differences into rhythm and behavior. Wealthy families could afford to extend their days, engaging in reading, writing, conversation, or entertainment well into the evening. Their homes might be lit enough to display art, to host gatherings, or to play music without straining the eyes. Light opened their nights to culture and leisure. The poor, however, were often forced to align their waking hours more closely with the sun. After dusk, their activities dwindled to what could be done in near darkness or with a single, wavering flame. The difference in lighting thus reinforced the divide in lifestyle. One group living in prolonged evenings of brilliance, another slipping more quickly into rest, silence, and sleep. Even in public life, disparities of light were visible. Streets in wealthier districts might have lamps maintained by private means, while poorer quarters fell into shadows after sunset. In some medieval towns, laws required residents to hang lanterns outside their houses, but compliance varied, often depending on wealth. To walk through a city at night was therefore to move through zones of brightness and darkness, each reflecting the economic status of those who lived within. Symbolism deepened these divides. In many traditions, light was associated with purity, divinity, and authority. Churches and cathedrals glowed with the brilliance of countless candles during services, the cost borne by patrons or institutions. The common worshiper, meanwhile, might own only a single crude lamp for their home. Even in spiritual life, the contrast between rich and poor was illuminated, quite literally, by the availability of flame. For the wealthy, illumination was not only functional but aesthetic. Chandeliers of wrought iron or gilded bronze were suspended in halls. Colored glass lanterns softened and refracted light into pleasing patterns. In Islamic palaces, intricately pierced metal lamps cast delicate webs of shadow across tiled walls. In the Byzantine Empire, silver lamps adorned with crosses or sacred figures gleamed in ceremonial spaces. For the poor, none of this splendor was attainable. Their light came simply, often directly, without ornament. And yet, both wealthy and poor shared the fundamental human need to push back the dark, however briefly. A single flicker in a modest hut carried as much symbolic weight for its family as a chandelier in a palace. Both flames stood against the same night, against the same uncertainty of what lingered in shadow. In this sense, the divide of light reminds us of the common thread that runs through human experience. Whether rich or poor, each household shaped its evenings around the fragile, temporary circle cast by fire. As you imagine this divide, picture the stillness of both homes, the senator's villa glowing with golden oil lamps, laughter carried into the night, while across the city, a poor family huddles around a single flame, shadows deep around them, silence interrupted only by the occasional sputter of a wick. Two worlds, two experiences, yet both bound by the same flickering necessity, light in the dark. In a long sweep of history, light was never only a practical necessity. It was also a tool of influence, a marker of authority, and an element of ceremony. For rulers, nobles, and institutions such as temples and churches, the ability to command light was to demonstrate wealth, organization, and even divine favor. To stand in the glow of many lamps was to stand apart from the ordinary rhythms of daily life. Imagine, first, the ancient palaces of Mesopotamia. In the throne rooms of Assyrian kings, torchlight played deliberately upon carved stone reliefs. The flickering fire highlighted the muscles of stone lions, the wings of guardian spirits, and the faces of kings carved into the walls. Illumination was carefully staged, transforming stone into something almost alive. A visitor to such a hall might feel overwhelmed, surrounded not only by architecture, but by shifting shadows that magnified the king's grandeur. In this setting, light was power. It elevated the ruler into a figure larger than life, distinct from the ordinary world outside. In Egypt, temples used light in different ways. Rituals at dawn invited the sun itself, the god Ra, into sacred chambers. Priests carried lamps in procession, their flames symbolizing the eternal renewal of life. To witness a temple filled with hundreds of small flames was to enter a space of shimmering reverence, a place where earthly light reached upward toward the divine. The average farmer or craftsman could never afford such abundance, but within temple walls, light was communal, overwhelming, and deeply symbolic. Later, in medieval Europe, monarchs used candles and lamps to underscore their authority. Banquet halls were set aglow with wax candles, whose expense alone was a statement. To host a feast by candlelight, while common people outside relied on darkness or rushlights, was to display not only hospitality, but hierarchy. The hall itself seemed to gleam with privilege. The more candles, the greater the implied power. Even the act of illuminating a royal chapel with beeswax was an act of financial might, as if to say, we can bring day into night, abundance into scarcity. Churches, too, recognized the power of light. Cathedrals became theaters of illumination. Tall windows, filled with stained glass, filtered daylight into colored beams, while countless candles transformed interiors into glowing sanctuaries. Light was not accidental here. It was central. To walk into a dark nave and see an altar blazing with flame was to be reminded of divine presence, of sacred authority. The candle's small, persistent glow stood as metaphor. The soul's endurance, faith's constancy. In ceremonies, processions of clergy holding candles marked sacred occasions, turning night into a moving sea of small lights. For a medieval villager, rarely able to afford more than a tallow dip, the sight must have been overwhelming, a vision of heavenly abundance, carefully staged by institutions of power. In the Islamic world, mosques and palaces were equally attentive to light. Hanging glass lamps, often inscribed with calligraphy, cast a soft glow across prayer halls. Their reflections danced upon polished marble floors and intricately painted ceilings. At night, these lamps became symbols of learning, beauty, and divine order. To pray beneath their glow was to participate in something larger than oneself. For rulers who commissioned them, lamps were a way to express devotion, but also to display patronage and authority, proof that they could sustain beauty and light on a scale beyond the reach of ordinary households. Beyond religion, public ceremonies often revolved around flame. Torches lit triumphal processions through Roman streets. Lanterns decorated medieval festivals, turning darkness into celebration. In both cases, those who organized and controlled the distribution of light controlled the very rhythm of civic life. A city festival illuminated with hundreds of torches not only entertained, but reminded its people of the wealth and organization of its rulers. The symbolism extended further still. In coronations and enthronements, light was central. Kings were crowned beneath chandeliers ablaze with candles. Emperors entered halls lined with flaming torches. In Byzantium, silver lamps shimmered as processions passed. The association was unmistakable. Power and light were intertwined. Where rulers went, light followed. Where rulers sat, night was pushed back. Darkness belonged outside. Within the sphere of authority, there was always flame. Yet, even in its grandeur, this ceremonial light carried a certain fragility. All lamps required fuel. All candles burned down. Behind the spectacle lay labor. Servants carrying oil, apothecaries selling wax, craftsmen forging lampstands. The poor who produced the fuel often lived without light themselves, while their labor allowed others to shine. In this way, ceremonial light reveals not only splendor, but also the hidden networks of effort sustaining it. Still, the effect was undeniable. Imagine yourself standing in a medieval square as night falls. Slowly, torches are lit around a platform. A monarch appears, framed in flickering light. Musicians play, banners shift in the glow. The crowd feels the power of the moment, not only in the words spoken, but in the very manipulation of darkness. To summon brightness against the natural order of night was to signal command over more than people. It was to suggest command over nature itself. Thus, throughout history, light was used not merely to see, but to rule, to impress, to inspire awe, and to reinforce divides. It marked sacred spaces from ordinary ones, leaders from subjects, holy time from common time. Even now, in our electric age, when light can be summoned with the flick of a switch, echoes remain. Bright stages, lit monuments, glowing capitals at night, they all carry the same message: light as a symbol of power. And so, across centuries, rulers and institutions did more than illuminate their surroundings. They illuminated their authority. Light was not only comfort in the dark. It was hierarchy made visible, a soft but undeniable proclamation that some flames were grander, brighter, and more enduring than others. When the sun set in pre-modern societies, the world did not fall silent. Life after dark continued, shaped entirely by the fragile reach of firelight. But the nature of evening, its moods and possibilities, depended greatly on wealth, place, and purpose. Night was not uniform. It was a shifting terrain of glow and shadow, gathering and solitude. In cities, public squares often came alive at dusk. Merchants might keep stalls open with the aid of lanterns, selling food, drink, or simple goods. Torches mounted on walls threw uneven light onto cobbled streets, where neighbors gathered to share stories or news. Children darted in and out of the dim glow, their laughter softened by distance. Yet darkness always hovered close, just beyond the edge of the flames. A single extinguished torch could plunge a corner into silence and unease. For the wealthy, evenings were occasions for leisure. In Rome, grand dinner parties stretched long into the night. Oil lamps flickered above musicians, dancers, and poets reciting verses. Conversation flowed easily beneath the steady glow of multiple flames, while servants moved silently to refill lamps, trim wicks, or replace spent torches. Guests felt enveloped in a sphere of warmth and light, protected from the pressing dark outside. Similar scenes repeated centuries later in European palaces and manor houses, where candlelit banquets turned dining into ceremony, shadows dancing across painted ceilings. For the poor, evenings carried a quieter rhythm. A single lamp or candle provided just enough light for weaving, mending, or hushed talk before bed. Children squinted at shadows on walls, inventing games with shapes cast by the flame. Some families saved their light for essential moments only, mealtimes, prayers, or emergencies. Otherwise, they let night settle naturally around them, yielding to sleep earlier than their wealthier neighbors. The dark was not resisted so much as accepted. Taverns and inns created another form of nightlife. In medieval towns, their interiors glowed dimly with clusters of candles or smoky tallow lamps. Here, travelers and locals gathered, drinking ale, trading stories, and listening to music. The lighting was uneven, sometimes smoky, but the shared flame gave a sense of intimacy. Laughter, song, and argument rose together, bound by the fragile circle of light that held back the night outside. For many, these spaces provided not only food and drink, but fellowship, moments of community woven around fire. Religious and seasonal festivals transformed entire towns after dusk. Lantern processions wound through narrow streets, their soft glow reflecting on stone walls. Bonfires blazed in open fields, visible for miles, turning night into a time of celebration. At such moments, light was collective, communal, no longer confined to households or palaces. It became shared spectacle. To stand among hundreds, each holding a candle or lantern, was to feel part of something greater, a shared defiance of darkness. These nights lingered in memory, their glow echoing long after flames went out. But night also belonged to danger. Without light, Streets were places of uncertainty. Many towns imposed curfews, with night watchmen carrying lanterns to patrol. Their flames moved slowly through the dark, symbols of order amid risk. Criminals, too, knew how to use shadow. Theft, mischief, and secrecy often thrived where flames did not reach. To walk alone at night, carrying only a lantern, was to step into a fragile space between safety and exposure. Every gust of wind, every sputter of a wick, reminded one how easily the boundary could dissolve. Even in the countryside, where farms spread beneath starlit skies, the rhythm of light shaped social life. Families gathered around hearths, their only illumination a fire in the center of the room. Songs were sung, stories passed down, while sparks drifted upward. Outside, the world was vast, silent, and dark. Villagers traveling after sunset sometimes carried torches or simple lanterns, their light swaying against hedgerows and paths. To see another glow approaching across fields was to recognize both companionship and caution, for not every light was a friend's. Through all of this, the social fabric of light was fragile yet profound. A single flame could gather people, create a circle of trust, or mark a place of authority. The difference between solitude and fellowship, between unease and celebration, often rested on whether a lamp was lit. Nightlife in pre-Electra times was never fully secure, never entirely free. Yet within its limits, people found joy, ritual, and belonging. So imagine, for a moment, standing in a medieval town square during a lantern festival. Flames sway gently in the night air. Faces glow with shared wonder. Shadows ripple across walls. Somewhere nearby, a tavern door opens, spilling warm candlelight onto the street. Farther away, a lone figure walks with a lantern, its glow bobbing in rhythm with footsteps. Each light holds meaning, each flame a reminder of the delicate balance by which human beings once pushed back the dark. And so, whether in the quiet glow of a cottage hearth or the glittering blaze of a noble hall, the flame itself remained constant, fragile yet enduring, humble yet essential. Let us pause with that single light and allow it to guide us into reflection as our journey gently draws to a close. As our journey draws to a close, let us return to the simple image of a flame. Across centuries and civilizations, from the hearths of humble cottages to the gilded halls of palaces, from the dim glow of taverns to the radiant blaze of cathedrals, that fragile spark has shaped human life. Light was more than survival. It was presence, meaning, and memory. Think of how many evenings were shaped by its glow. Families gathered around a single lamp, their words softened by flickering shadows. Monarchs displayed their power through banquets ablaze with candles. Priests, monks, and worshippers raised flame as prayer, letting its smoke rise into vaulted roofs or into open skies. Children played in its reach, lovers whispered in its half-dark, and travelers trusted it as a fragile companion along lonely roads. Each flame carried not only warmth, but story. Over time, generations passed, but the same gestures endured. The trimming of a wick, the careful pouring of oil, the striking of flint against stone, the shielding of a candle against the wind. These were small rituals, repeated endlessly, binding people across centuries. To tend a flame was to participate in a rhythm older than memory, older than kingdoms, older even than writing itself. And in that rhythm lay both limitation and beauty. The darkness always pressed close. Light was scarce, fragile, fleeting. Yet it was enough. Enough to tell stories. Enough to create moments of fellowship. Enough to mark sacred hours. enough to make human life feel luminous, even against vast and endless night. As you reflect on these images, notice how light and dark were not enemies, but partners. Night was not merely absence, but a canvas upon which flame could draw meaning. Shadows were not only threats, but companions, shaping the atmosphere of hearth and festival, solitude and ceremony. It was within this balance that pre-modern life unfolded, a world slower, quieter, more attentive to the fragile endurance of every spark. Now, as we prepare to leave this journey, imagine yourself seated once more beside a small, steady flame. The room around you is calm, the air still, the world softened by darkness. Shadows drift gently along the walls, unhurried, unthreatening. Beyond the walls lies silence, perhaps the vast dome of night sky, scattered with stars. The flame before you holds steady, its glow constant, reassuring. This is how countless nights once ended. Not with a switch, not with sudden brilliance, but with the slow dimming of a lamp, the steady fading of light. People laid down to rest as the flame dwindled, trusting the night to hold them, trusting morning to return. And so too may you rest now, carrying with you the quiet rhythm of that ancient cycle. Let the thought of this enduring flame accompany you, steady and unhurried. Let it soften your breath, calm your mind, and ease your body into stillness. You are safe in its glow. You are part of the same long human story, one of gathering, of reflection, of comfort found in light. And as the flame slowly fades, so too may your thoughts drift into the quiet rest of night. Sleep well, carried by the gentle glow of history's countless lamps, and may your dreams unfold like shadows softened by an eternal flame.